We made it, boys. It is finally 2025. We're less than 2 weeks away from our first UFC event of 2025. Look, I've never posted a long form YouTube video before, but starting this year, we're going to start doing them. I'm going to get right into it. I'm going to break down this whole entire card, give you my early leans, who I think should win. I'm going to break down some stats, what I'm going to be looking at from each winner in each fight. With all that being said, I don't want to waste any time. Just make sure you subscribe, turn your post notifications on, drop a like, drop a comment, help push this thing out to the algorithm. Without any further ado, let's get into it. The first fight on this card at UFC Vegas 101 is Nurullo Aliev versus Yanal Ashmaul. Now look, Yanal Ashmaul coming off of a good performance against Trevor Peek, but I think what we found out from Peek over the last, let's just say, year and a half or midsummer of 2023 is that the guy just might not quite be UFC level. He's extremely tough. He doesn't get finished in any of his fights. He does hit hard when he can connect, but as he's fought in higher and higher levels of competition, Trevor Peek has struggled. And Ashmaul, I wouldn't even put him as a super high level of competition. The guy's not the biggest guy for 155. He does hit pretty hard. He throws some crazy spinning stuff. Doesn't throw the most volume in the world, actually gets touched up a little bit too, but he's good when he can mix in his own wrestling. He mixed in a bunch against Trevor Peek. The only problem is here against Nurullo Aliev is that Aliev's a very dominant grappler and wrestler. The guy's very big for 155 as far as strength and durability goes. He's got that checked off. Made his debut against Rafael Alves. Now, Alves didn't have the greatest UFC career by any means. It wasn't a long UFC career, as I think he's been cut since. But the dude is tough. He's athletic. He's very strong, and he's got a good ground game with the jiu-jitsu and everything. And Aliev was able to, didn't really even have to get his striking going, just landed takedowns over and over, kept Alves on his back. And honestly, Nurullo Aliev is so strong, especially against a guy like Ashmaul, that if he lands takedowns, I don't really necessarily see Ashmaul getting back up to his feet. I'm not going to compare the skill level here, but Nurullo Aliev his style at least reminds me a lot of Khabib Nurmagomedov, Jesus, where, the striking's not real clean, it's not real crisp, but he does hit hard and he uses all of his shots to set up the takedowns. It's exactly what Nurullo Aliev's going to do. I don't really like this line. I'm not going to be parlaying him here, but I do think he wins the fight over Yanal Ashmaul to kick off 2025. Not a bad little fight to start off the year. In the second fight of the night, we're getting Fatima versus Victoria Dudakova. Now, Fatima doesn't sound familiar. This is only going to be her second UFC fight. She's a training partner and close friend of Erin Blanchfield. Similar styles as well. She's going to be fighting Victoria Dudakova. And Dudakova had a nice little 3-fight win streak, if you're counting Contender Series. Beat Estela Nunez when Nunez broke her arm. Beat Jinyu Frey. And then lost to Sam Hughes her last time out. But against Sam Hughes, the big red flag, if you will, for Dudakova is that she looked extremely tired after the first round. She was taking big, deep breaths. And it's not like Sam was even trying to implement the wrestling. It was all Dudakova going for the wrestling. And she paid the price in the second and third round, where Sam Hughes was able to kind of put the pace on her, outstrike her, and just way more volume that looked better to the judges. Now, with Fatima it's kind of going to be the opposite. Klein's not going to throw a ton of volume out there on the feet. She does hit hard. She swings hard. But, again, she uses everything to go to her wrestling. Her fault against Jasmine Jasudavicius is she took that fight on just a couple of days' notice, if I remember correctly. It's not like she also moved up a weight class to 125 pounds to fight Jasmine Jasudavicius. And, you're drawing a Jasudavicius in your UFC debut on short notice is never an easy task. That line was almost even when the books closed. And, Fatima just kind of got wrestled up a little bit. She got picked apart on the feet at times, but at other times she had some good combinations. And when she had to go for it in the third, she was swinging with some ill intent. I like to see that. She landed her own takedown against Jasmine Jasudavicius, a bigger girl, taller, and up a weight class. Like Fatima I think is very skilled. And I think we saw it against Jasmine that she's got the tools. She's got the striking. It's not great, but it's doable for women's MMA. And, the wrestling, if she can offensively get it going, I think she's going to have success. I think that's exactly what she does here against Dudakova. Don't even mess with the striking because you're probably going to be outmatched in that department. But she will be stronger, faster, and have the better offensive wrestling. And if she can do that, I think Dudakova stays on her back and has a hard time getting back to her feet. For that reason, I'm taking Fatima but these odds are insane. Fatima Klein, a massive, massive favorite after losing 30-27 in your UFC debut. I'm not going to be parlaying that. I'm not going to be betting on Fatima Klein until I see another fight. Maybe after this fight, I'll have a better idea on how she's going to present herself in the future. But for now, Fatima Klein will be the pick, but definitely not going to invest any money into it. Our next fight on UFC Vegas 101, Magomed Gaethje versus Bruno Lopez. Now, this one's interesting to me because you got Bruno Lopez, who came in on the Contender Series in 2023, and he was one of the biggest favorites of the entire season, minus 800, minus 900, if I remember right, against Brinson Hiberio. Now, Brinson Hiberio, the guy swings hard. In the first round, he's as dangerous as anybody, but he gasses out. And, unlucky for Bruno Lopez, he just caught a nasty hook on the way in, and it put Bruno Lopez out, and Hiberio ended up getting a UFC contract. And actually went in to fight Magomed Gaethje 2 fights ago for Hiberio. And interesting enough about that fight, Gaethje, big favorite, was winning the first round until he started getting his leg kicked off and was hurt really badly. Looked like he was kind of hobbling around and couldn't put weight on it. And it looked like Hiberio might have been able to finish the fight if the trend kept going that way in the fight. But ultimately, Magomed went to the wrestling, controlled Hiberio. Ribeiro didn't really have anything left in the second and third and got beat. Now, going up against Bruno Lopez, if you want to take him down in this spot, Bruno Lopez is known for his ground game. His jiu-jitsu is good. I don't know how good it's going to be off of his back, but I don't really think Magomed Gaethje is one of these guys that's going to go on a crazy run in the UFC. I don't think he's going to rack up a ton of wins or anything. His game's a little basic. He's hittable, and if he can't get the wrestling going, I think he struggles against guys. And if this fight plays out on the feet, both guys have enough power to knock the other out. So, if you're parlaying Gaethje is a big favorite, I think you got to be really careful because he's a guy that seems like he's going to drop the ball. I mean, he almost did against Hiberio in that first round, getting his leg just absolutely chewed up. So I'd be very careful in this fight if you're on Gaethje. I think Bruno Lopez has the tools to kind of make this closer than people might think. Next fight is Ernesta Karakady versus Nicole Calari. Now, Karakady, I actually like her game. Her striking is good. She's 5'9" for the 125-pound women's division. That's pretty tall and long. And so far through her Contender Series fight and her UFC fight, she lands nearly 8 significant strikes per minute, which is extremely high, probably among the top in the division, even though it's a small sample size. She also gets hit a little bit, but from what we've seen, she doesn't have the most power in the world, but she throws a ton of volume and she's accurate, and she's actually a skilled striker, mixes in her kicks. I think it's going to take her far at this level of women's mixed martial arts because, if you can outpoint and outpace your opponents in women's MMA, unless they've got some crazy wrestling game, normally you can get your hand raised quite a bit. She lost her last fight to Dione Barbosa. She outstruck Barbosa 53-39. She was just taken down a few times, put into a submission attempt, and the judges went with Barbosa in that matchup. Her opponent, Nicole Calari, was the one on the Contender Series that came in against Corinne Laframboise, a Canadian fighter, this past year, and went out there and submitted her in the first round via armbar. I took Calari as a plus 120 dog in that fight. I remember it well. She's a girl whose striking isn't the best. She's gritty. She will, if the fight gets to the ground, like you saw in the Contender Series, she snapped off an armbar pretty quickly. She's very talented with the jiu-jitsu, and that's where she's going to have to get this fight, because if she stands with Karakady, she's just not big enough in this spot. Nicole Calari is 5'3" compared to Karakady, who's 5'9", and you're talking about a long technical striker like Karakady. It's going to be hard for Calari to really keep up, especially with the pace, the volume, and the accuracy. Calari, if she gets it to the ground, has a great chance to win. The only problem is I don't really know if Calari possesses the wrestling game to get the fight there and hold Karakady down until an opportunity presents itself for a submission. For those reasons, I'm going Ernesta Karakady to win with the strikes, with the volume, and put the pace on her. So, but this is a lower level women's mixed martial arts fight. Again, these fights on these prelims, on these Apex cards, you got to be really careful with. Next fight is one of my favorite fights on this entire card. I'm excited to see Andreas Gustafsson taking on Preston Parsons. Gustafsson on the Contender Series was impressive. The guy came out. The guy comes out like a bat out of hell. And if you watch his fights, it's kind of weird because he's not the most skilled fighter in the world by any means. The guy is he is durable. Have you seen every fight he's in is an all-out dog fight, all-out war. Everybody's bloody, and he usually pulls through and can find finishes as well. So, I mean, you can't fault him for that. I just think at the UFC level, you got to have a little bit more to your game than just being tough and durable and wait until your opponents just can't take it anymore. It's not that he's a bad fighter. I'm trying to figure out how to explain what I'm seeing. Maybe stiff. Stiff is the word. I mean, this guy comes out there, his striking's powerful, but he's very stiff everywhere. And a guy like Preston Parsons, who probably moves a little bit better than Gustafsson, who's probably a little quicker with his striking, and on the ground, Parsons is very good with the jiu-jitsu. He's going to look to wrestle. The only thing that scares me here is that Gustafsson seems to, be one of these guys that looks a little tired but just pushes through. And if he can get Parsons tired as well, maybe Gustafsson takes over and does some damage late in the fight. But so far, Gustafsson making his debut here as a minus 180 favorite, it's got me tempted to look at Preston Parsons, because even though Parsons has some losses in the UFC, the guy's been fighting at a higher level than Gustafsson. The guy's actually had some decent experience. Just lost to Obon Elliott, beat Matthew Simmelsberger, lost to Trevin Giles, beat Evan Elder, lost to Daniel Rodriguez. Like, this guy's fighting some good guys. So I'm actually going to take a little stab on the dog here. I'll take Preston Parsons plus 150. Might end up regretting it, but if he can just stay patient, put Gustafsson up against the fence, look out for the knees and elbows, work in some takedowns, I think he should be able to compete pretty well in this fight. It'll be a close fight. I line it more at a pick'em, and if you're giving me plus 150 on a guy who I think should be minus 110, I'm going to take the stab at the underdog here. Next fight on the card is, we got Thiago Moises versus Trey Ogden. Super interesting fight to me here. Trey Ogden comes in as the underdog once again in a fight where, this guy seems to cash pretty well as a dog. He's plus 150 right now. Thiago Moises sitting at minus 180. You look at Thiago Moises' last fight against Ludovic Klein. The guy got pieced up on the feet pretty badly. He was hurt in the first round. He was hurt in the third. He got dropped twice. He was outstruck 56-24, and he was taken down once. Now, Thiago Moises, when he gets his game going, his striking's pretty clean. It's decent, and he likes to mix in the wrestling of his own. And when he can do that, he does have a lot of success. The only problem is I look at his wins. He lost to Benoit Saint-Denis, which doesn't age great now, just considering Benoit Saint-Denis has just been brutalized in his last two fights. And then he's beaten Mitch Ramirez, who was on his UFC debut, who lost on the Contender Series. And before that, beat Melk Costa. Melk Costa's kind of been up and down. Christos Gallegos, who's older. And then he's beaten, Michael Johnson, Alexander Hernandez, Kurt Hollaball back, in 2019, 2020. So, as of lately, he's been getting beat up a little bit. He's not really looking like he's taking the shots and the damage as well. I guess lucky for him, Trey Ogden's not a big power puncher. Trey Ogden's more of a fight IQ, high IQ type of fighter, I guess is what I'm trying to say. He has good wrestling. He's pretty big, and he's in great shape for the division. On two-win streak, he beat Loic Radzhabov, where he had to eat some big shots, but Trey Ogden's the guy that if you start beating him in the striking, he's going to mix in the wrestling. And if you start beating him in the wrestling, he's got the tools to kind of get back up to his feet, stuff the takedowns, and once you get tired, he's going to take over with the striking. He beat Kurt Hollaball in the fight before that, beat Nicholas Mata. The ref messed up, so it had to be a no contest after Mata was deep in an arm triangle in the third. There wasn't a tap. The ref thought there was. They stopped the fight. Ended up being a no contest, but he should be on a 3-fight winning streak, and he should be 4-1 in his last 5 after he beat Daniel Zellhuber at UFC Fight Night Sandhagen vs. Song, which was in 2022. So the guy's had a good showing for himself in his last 5 fights. Another interesting one is the underdog here, just because Thiago Moises hasn't looked great. Trey Ogden has looked pretty damn good, so this is another one I'm going to side with Trey Ogden here. I think the fight IQ should take him far. If he can just do a little bit of damage, mix in the wrestling himself, get Thiago Moises tired, take some snap out of his shots, I think Trey Ogden should do pretty well down the stretch in this fight. Now in the next fight up, we're getting Marco Tulio versus Ior Potieria. Potieria just seems like a guy now where I mean, he doesn't have rankings, aspirations to be ranked in this division. The guy's taking any fight he can. He's saying yes to the UFC just so he can stay around in the organization. Because you look at his record, the guy's 1-4 in his last 5 fights. The only guys he's beating is Shogun Hua in Shogun's retirement fight. And Shogun was over 40 years old. And he beat Robert Drycek, who was making his UFC debut, who's a nothing but striker. And Poirier was able to survive in the first. Drycek got a little more tired, and Poirier was kind of took over the fight in the second half. So other than that, man, he has been fighting high levels of competition. Cesar Almeida, Michel Pereira, Rodolfo Bellato, and Carlos Ulberg. Now, the Bellato loss is interesting because Bellato's a guy who's very tough. He's massive. He's kind of just got a blockhead and marches forward and tries to get you down for the jiu-jitsu. And he about took Bellato's head off in that first round, had him badly hurt, dropped him. Ref could have stopped the fight, but didn't. And Bellato was able to survive. And Poirier gassed out after trying to find the finish and was finished in the second round. So Poirier has shown flashes of being good. He doesn't have the best chin in the world. He will get hit, but if he can land a couple of big shots early, you can see his confidence going up, and he starts building off that. And if you leave him around in the second and third round, he's not scared to dog it out with you. If you can't knock him out, and he realizes you can't knock him out, he kind of turns into a junkyard dog, and he can play that game. Now, Marco Tulio got a decision win against Yusri Belgari on the Contender Series in 2023. The UFC didn't sign him at that point, gave him another chance in the Contender Series where he got the second round spinning back kick knockout. Looked pretty good. I think sometimes when I watch him fight against decent levels of competition, he's a little gun shy with the striking at time, but when he lets the hands go and he lets the kicks go, the guy is very powerful. He hits hard. It's just hard to take these guys that are making their UFC debut as massive favorites like this. Hate to see it. It's think of how many times you've had a minus 500 in your parlay and he goes out there and just gets his ass beat because it's his UFC debut. I mean, Marco Tulio is a minus 500 against the guy who's got 6 or 7 UFC fights, against the Michel Pereiras, Cesar Almeidas, like guys who are a lot better than Marco Tulio. So it's interesting to me. I think Tulio should be the favorite. I think he should win, but minus 500 is insane, and there could be a little value on that plus 350, especially if you're going to live bet this. Poirier probably loses the first round, but if he's around in the second and third, maybe you take a stab at it, see what happens, because he's won some decisions in close fights before. Next fight, we're getting Jose Johnson versus Felipe Bues. Jose Johnson, 6 foot tall at 125 pounds. That's massive for the division. The guy is long. He's a well-rounded fighter too. He's had some losses in the UFC. Let's put it that way. But if you look at the names, it's Damon Blackshear when Blackshear was on his little run. Asu Almabayev, who's climbing the ranks and just went in there and beat Mateus Nicolau by decision pretty easily. So, he's fighting good guys. He beat Chad Anhelinger by submission in round 3. That's a good win. But, going up against Bues, it's kind of an unknown because Felipe had to come in his debut and fight Joshua Van. And honestly, in the first round, Felipe looked phenomenal. I thought, this guy's looking good. If he can keep this up, he's winning this fight over Joshua Van easily. Turns out he couldn't. Van started investing in the body with the shots, landed some big shots upstairs. Bues never really stopped fighting until he got dropped and finished at the end, but you could tell how tired he was in that second round. Not a good sign. And, Bues also went for a bunch of wrestling in that spot. He landed 2 takedowns, but the problem going with the wrestling against Jose Johnson is that if you can't control him, like Asu Almabayev was able to, he's a very, very dangerous submission artist as well, especially off of his back with how long he is. He works in arm bars, triangles, and if Felipe Bues goes for a takedown and makes a mistake and ends up on his back, Johnson's good with those sharp elbows and the ground and pound, and if you turn your back, he'll look for the submissions as well. So in this spot, I think this is Jose Johnson getting the win, especially if it gets extended into the second and third. I actually think somebody gets finished in this spot, though. Both guys are great with the submissions. Both guys hit hard and like to strike as well. So I might be looking at an under in this fight, especially if it's at 2.5 at a decent number. But for the pick, I got to go with the 6 foot tall flyweight and Jose Johnson. Excuse me. I always want to say Jose for Jose Aldo. Next fight, Punahele Soriano taking on Uros Medic. Now this one's it's tough to gauge where Puna Soriano's at, just because the guy had a rough patch Fought Roman Kopilov. Actually, let's take it a little bit further back. Fought Brendan Allen in 2021 and loses a decision where he was outstruck. The whole fight was on the feet, and he was outstruck 94-66 against Bruno Allen. Loses to Nick Maximov by split decision, which was a close fight, but he was taken down 11 times. Beats the Dolce Lungambulas of the division. But when he fights Roman Kopilov, Punahele Soriano started to gas out. He didn't look the same. He couldn't get his striking going. And, maybe a lot of that is Roman just blasting those kicks, mixed in a takedown as well. But, when he fought Dustin Stoltzfus, it was kind of the same story. He looked good in the first round for a bit. Dustin started to take over at the end of the first. Ultimately went to the wrestling in the second round and got the submission over Punahele Soriano. So the one thing that it's still an unknown for me, though, is that he's dropping down to 170 pounds now. Those are all at 185, where he was getting tired and everything. Now he's kind of forced himself to get back into shape, get into really good shape to make 170. And we saw it in his first fight at 170 last time against Miguel Baeza. He outstruck Miguel Baeza 144-7 with 5 takedowns. It was basically all ground and pound, but a lot of significant strikes and completely dominated the fight. I forget what the judges' scorecards were, but it was like 30-24, 30-25, had a couple of 10-8s, just completely dominated. Going up against Uros Medic, though, completely different animal than a Miguel Baeza. While this fight's on the feet, Puna is going to have to watch his back and mind his P's and Q's because Medic has got some hands on him. He's very good. But, if Punahele Soriano can go out there and wrestle in this spot like he did against Baeza, he could definitely win the first round or second round and look to see what happens in the third. If he gasses out, you just got to survive and you probably get your hand raised. But we saw Medic taken down by Miktabek Oral by 7 times in under 2 rounds. Uros Medic has been taken down by Jalen Turner, who's not a great wrestler. So, it's not out of this realm to think that the former 185-pound guy who's very strong, who's in shape now, is going to have a great game plan because he's got great coaches like Eric Nixick and the guys at Extreme Couture behind him. It's not out of this world to think that he's going to have a wrestling-heavy game plan, and if he can secure some of those and land ground and pound, maybe he's stealing that first round. Maybe the second round's close, and Medic maybe takes on the third. It's a lot closer fight than I think people think. And I think people are kind of counting Punahele Soriano out just because of his couple of fights at 185 a few years ago. So Punahele Soriano is currently plus 160, Uros Medic minus 190. I can't really say those odds are crazy or anything, but, maybe dog or pass. We'll see what happens. Maybe you play the KO prop for Medic or the decision prop for Punahele Soriano. But, should be a banger nonetheless and a fun fight to kind of get us kicked off there in the main card, I believe it is. Next fight, we're getting Christian Rodriguez versus Austin Bashi. Now, if you follow me on TikTok and Instagram, you already saw the video that I'm taking C-Rod as my first underdog of the year. And I got a couple of reasons I'm doing that. Bashi's looked good. He's 13-0, never lost. He's undefeated. But, Christian Rodriguez is the prospect killer. They put Raul Rosas Jr. in front of C-Rod. Raul was a big favorite, and C-Rod was able to just completely dominate him in the second and third round, outlanded him 29-2, even took Rosas Jr. down once and took his back a couple more times in the fight. Then he fights the 9-0 Cameron Simon and outstrikes him by 83-73 and had 3 takedowns of his own in that spot, gets an easy unanimous decision. And then his next fight, he fights a 7 or 8-0 Isaac Dolgarian. Maybe he was even like 5 or 6-0. And outstrikes him 48-22. Got taken down like 5 times in the first round, one time in the first round and a few handful more times in the rest of the fight. But Dolgarian just couldn't finish him in the first. C-Rod survived, and Dolgarian started to gas out. And when you do that, when you're undefeated, never had to face any adversity, and you got a guy like C-Rod in front of you, he knows how to make you pay for all those takedown attempts. And when you're getting a little bit tired, he invests in the body. He'll mix in a takedown of his own, put you on your back and force you to try to get up to the feet to get you more tired. And, on the feet, he's better. He's a better striker than a lot of these wrestlers he's had to face. And he's getting another one now with Austin Bashi. This is just right up C-Rod's wheelhouse. This is the type of fight he wins. Guys that haven't faced much adversity, guys that are wrestling and grappling heavy, guys that he's a better striker than. It all fits the bill here. I got C-Rod at plus 185. Not that Bashi isn't great or isn't going to be a great fighter or, evolve into one down the road, because I think he definitely can. But this is off the Contender Series, your UFC debut, the big stage, the bright lights. He's going to be nervous. He's going to have all those jitters and adrenaline. And when you can't go out there and get a first round finish, sometimes that plays into your head a little bit, and kind of turns back to hurt you. So yeah, we'll see what happens. But I took C-Rod at plus 185. I thought that was a pretty good number. Too good to pass up. Next fight, Chris Curtis versus Roman Kopov. Chris Curtis coming off the loss to Brendan Allen, which was a great back-and-forth fight that was probably decided by the 5th round. It was a split decision win for Brendan Allen. Before that, Chris Curtis beat up on Marc-Andre Barriault, landed 140 significant strikes. And then he's fighting guys like Nasruddin Imavov. There was a headbutt in that fight, so it's a no contest. Kelvin Gastelum, Joaquin Buckley, who he knocked out in the 2nd round. Jack Hermanson, Rodolfo Vieira. Like, this guy is fighting some of the best competition in the entire division. And now he's getting Roman Kopov, who might be the best kickboxer in the division or one of them, but Kopolov's shown some holes in his gains as of recent. He got the win over Cesar Almeida in his last fight. He landed the knockdown early, but Kopov was getting tired, man, and it forced him to have to wrestle in that spot. He landed 5 takedowns on Almeida, but if he comes out here and has to wrestle against Chris Curtis, Curtis has some great takedown defense. The guy has a 82% takedown defense and, almost 10 UFC fights, maybe a little more. So the guy can definitely stuff the wrestling and defend really well. He throws a lot of volume as well, which could play a factor as this fight goes on. If Kopov starts to get tired and Chris Curtis can kind of up the volume. But the big number on the stats for Chris Curtis that concern me is that he gets hit with 6.16 significant strikes per minute, which means he's getting hit with more than he's given out, which I don't like to see when you're fighting a striker like Kopov, because Kopov, man, we've seen it in his fights. Josh Fremd, kick to the body, followed up with some punches, just nasty stuff. Claudio Ribeiro, maybe the worst and nastiest kick I've ever seen in mixed martial arts. Knocked him out, knocked out Puna, knocked out Alessio Shiriko. So, the guy has obviously got power. He's accurate and he's very skilled with the striking. That's what makes me concerned for Chris Curtis. Mixing that in with Chris Curtis being, closer to 40s, inching in there. I believe he's 38 to 39. So he doesn't have a ton of time left. And Roman Kopolov's kind of on the up and coming. Just got to fix the gas tank a little bit and, conserve a little energy. The good thing here is he doesn't have to worry about Chris Curtis mixing in takedowns, because I don't know if Chris Curtis has ever shot a takedown, and he doesn't really leg kick either. So this is going to be boxing versus kickboxing. I'm going to go with the kickboxer and Roman Kopov. Next fight on this main card, we are getting Cesar Almeida versus Abdul Razak Alhassan. Interesting fight just because, Almeida came into the UFC against Dylan Budka, and I think that was an evenly lined fight, and Almeida just showed that if you can't hold him down on the ground, while it's on the feet, he's going to make you pay. He's a very good striker. He's got some good cardio. He can fight deep into fights. And we saw it against Ior Potieria. He had to really dig deep in that spot. There was a ton of fouls in the fight, but ultimately, got the decision win, but was able to outland him significantly on the feet. And then loses to Roman Kopov because he got dropped in the first. But, he kind of worked his way back into that fight, which I love to see for a guy. Like, showed the cardio was there. Roman Kopov started to, rely on the takedowns because he was so tired. And Cesar Almeida, kind of got held against the cage, taken down. But on the feet towards the end of the fight, he was the one dishing out some damage to Roman Kopov. So, I do think his striking is going to be much better than Alhassan. Alhassan's more of a power puncher. He's not a real technical striker. He's actually a judo guy that kind of transformed into a striker once he started landing a couple of knockouts. So, if I'm Alhassan, I go to that judo in this spot against Almeida, working the takedowns, and kind of fight that game plan. But we've seen Alhassan slow down in the past. We've seen him get tired. And, when you do that against Almeida, he really, really makes you pay, especially with the teep kicks and the other body kicks and everything else. He can make it really tough on guys who do get tired and who are looking to wrestle. So if this thing gets out of the first round, I expect Alhassan maybe to slow down a little bit and Almeida start to take over. For those reasons, I'm going Cesar Almeida for the pick in this spot. Co-main event, Santiago Ponzano versus Carlston Harris. Ponzano is a guy who's always been extremely talented. He's a little bit older now. It seems like he's 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Had a super close fight in his last fight against Muslim Salikov, where it was a split decision. A lot of people thought he deserved to get his hand raised. He was fighting well against Kevin Holland until, 3 minutes into the third round, he got knocked out with the left hook. fight before that, he knocks out Alex Morono. He's knocked out, Neil Magny before. Gunnar Nelson, he's knocked out. Like, this guy has a lot of wins in the UFC, especially earlier on in his career. Has a win over Sean Strickland back in 2015. Like, it just shows you the level of competition, how long he's been doing it. He's got the experience on his side as well. But like I said, still at his age, older, hits hard, got good striking. He's game to fight. But Carlston Harris is a guy who's a little awkward on the feet. His movements are weird. It's not like he has the most power in the world whatsoever. But when he can get the striking going, it opens up other opportunities for him. If he wants to see a takedown or wants to mix in a takedown, he's going to do it off of his striking combinations to catch you off guard. And when he does get fights to the ground, he's pretty good with the jiu-jitsu. He's got a couple of subs in the UFC, one over Christian Aguilera and the other against Jeremiah Wells in a fight that he was getting beat pretty badly, and then found the anaconda choke in round 3. So in this spot, I think Ponzanivio's wrestling defense and takedown defense is going to be good enough to keep it on the feet. I don't think Carlston Harris throws enough volume or has the power to really bother Ponzanivio super badly, but I do think Ponzanivio can get to Carlston Harris. Carlston Harris is coming off of a nasty knockout loss over Chaos Williams back in May. This is his first fight back. Got the chin touched in the last one. Wouldn't be surprised if Ponzanivio does it again. I believe Ponzanivio is a slight underdog still at like plus 105. So I'm really thinking about jumping on that number, especially if it starts to get into some bigger plus money. So I'll take Ponzanivio for the pick in this one. Again, this could be a very, very close fight though. In the main event, Mackenzie Dern, Amanda Ribas. Mackenzie Dern, man, has been a roller coaster in the UFC. Just beat Lupi Godinez, who's a girl who has a ton of wins in the UFC. Before that, loses to Amanda Lemos. Before that, gets knocked out by Jessica Andrade. Beats Angela Hill. Loses to Yan Xiaonan. Beats Tisha Pennington. Loses to Madrina Rodriguez. She's up and down. But the thing about Mackenzie Dern, she always gives herself a chance. If she can get the fight to the ground, because her jiu-jitsu is that good. It's not that her striking is, it's not good. It's not great, but she does hold a little bit of power in the right hand, and she will wing some bombs, and you don't want to get caught by them because she does hit hard. But, the striking just never has gotten super confident for her. And so fighting girls like Amanda Ribas, whose striking is going to be better, she's kind of at a disadvantage, because the one thing that Mackenzie Dern is missing in her game to really take it to the next level and start getting on a win streak is the wrestling. The jiu-jitsu is amazing on the ground. Everybody knows that. When she gets on top, she's probably going to find a finish or get close to one. But she has a tough time getting fights to the ground. Maybe she can land a trip or gets on a single leg and can work you down. But, it just doesn't look pretty. It's not really technical. Against the girl in Amanda Ribas, who in that department, she's a good grappler as well. She's going to know what she's doing. She's, going to be tough to take down for sure. And in fact, when they first fought back in 2019, Amanda Ribas outstruck her 74-20 and took her down twice herself. So it was Amanda Ribas implementing the wrestling and grappling, not Mackenzie Dern the first time they fought. I don't really know what's changed since the first time they fought. Ribas still going to be the better striker, going to have the better offensive wrestling. The only advantage I see here for Dern is, she's got the jiu-jitsu. Maybe she's a little bit more of a junkyard dog. Like, we've seen her work herself back into fights after being dropped badly. The ref could have stopped certain fights, and they don't. And, round 3, and she's on your back, making it a little bit sweaty. So, yeah, I'm going to take Amanda Ribas here. I think, all things considered, this fight looks somewhat similar to the first. She's going to be the better striker, way more volume, way more accurate. I think this is going to be a lot of Mackenzie Dern swinging and missing, and Amanda Ribas countering with some big shots, and then Mackenzie Dern kind of panic shooting takedowns off of that until either Ribas can find a finish or this thing goes to a decision. 5 rounds is a long time to be in there with somebody. Their first fight was only 3 rounds. Maybe Ribas gets tired and Dern can turn into that junkyard dog in rounds 4 and 5. I just don't know if Ribas is going to get tired. She seems like a girl who's motivated, been working super hard. I think the cardio is going to be in check, and I think she'll be able to beat her all 5 rounds. So taking Amanda Ribas in the main event, and that's the first breakdown of 2025. I appreciate you guys. Like I said in the beginning, this is my first long-form YouTube video, but we're going to drop them every single week for every single UFC card. So hit that subscribe button. Turn post notifications on, drop a comment or a like if you would to push this video out. I appreciate you guys. Good luck if you're betting on the first card at UFC Vegas 101 of 2025. And we will see you in the next video to break down maybe the best pay-per-view that we're going to get this year at UFC 311 in LA.